Oh, nice.
And we're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. Star Trek The Next Generation is what we're focused on. And this is directly after our recording of Unification Part 1. We're now doing Unification Part 2.
It's actually 2 weeks later.
But... And we're once again... No, it's actually not. And we're once again joined by our virtual guest, Moni or Ramon.
We're very special guests.
Very special.
I'm not very special.
You're just special. He's very special. So welcome back, Moni.
From Starfleet Command itself.
Okay. This kind of looks like
it is.
The desk unit as well. So yeah,
that's true.
You can be an admiral on today's episode. That's totally fine with me.
But you are in San Francisco.
He actually is.
That's right. So it is truly Starfleet headquarters.
Yeah,
that's right. That's why he's special.
Yes. Very special.
Very special, because he's in Starfleet Command, where we wish we were.
I actually had relocated Starfleet Command to Seattle when I was there. I don't know if you guys know about this.
So did you leave it there?
No. That was very good. All right, so unless someone else wants to give the episode summary, I'll go ahead and give it.
I think I can give it.
All right.
Picard and Spock finally meet, and they exchange. They. Oh wait, hold on. Let's recreate it here.
Oh, we can
actually recreate it. Walk with me, Picard.
Oh, that's right.
And then they go into the cave, because, of course, within moments of them meeting, Spock is upset. Picard accuses him of cowboy diplomacy, which Spock is very, I think it's a great compliment, but Spock is slightly offended. And
it's the same time, I think.
Right? Yeah. And of course, he has to communicate the unfortunate news of Sarek's passing, and that's when they go off into the passageway.
And Leonard Nimoy's voice chokes up in the scene where he's like, "Walk with me, Picard," because he kind of has like a that's like he kind of
does he?
Like that, yeah. Yes.
Does he?
Yes.
Does he? Okay.
Yes.
All right. I don't know if that does he?
That reminded me of I Like Italian.
I mean, he pauses. He gives a pause. And then he goes off, and they're in this adjacent cave. He basically gets an update as to what Spock is up to. He explains to him about unification, and Picard is surprised. And
then then Spock goes and meets Hugh Grant. The Romulan Hugh Grant.
The Romulan Hugh Grant. Well, the
Proconsul Neural.
Right.
He reminded me so much of Hugh Grant. I don't know why. I thought Hugh Grant would have been perfect for that role.
Well, from here on out, basically.
Do we know him?
No, this is
the first time.
And last time.
I don't know if it's the last time. But
generally in life, like in his acting career, like what?
Perhaps
you'll have to be the looker upper, because we can't access the keyboard at the moment.
Perhaps
so if you do an IMDb search, you can let us know. But anyways, go on.
Well, Spock kind of gives some background on how he met Pardek, and he speaks about Neural, and then basically the episode continues on from Spock is going to meet with the senator, and with the proconsul, and Picard is apprehensive. And meanwhile, on the Enterprise, they're continuing their investigation of this mysterious ship that exploded, and why is somebody stealing Vulcan hardware, and what are they doing with it? And it leads them into the this bar, sort of
space bar.
Space bar. Yes. And which it might be a callback to Star Trek 3. The space bar that McCoy walks into, or
the original series where they go to lots of space
or
bars.
Right. and Riker somehow manages to exchange information with just like, I'm going to show you. There's this four-handed barmaid who's playing the piano.
I got the impression that she may have owned the bar.
She doesn't actually.
Oh, she doesn't know because the novelization that we all hate, except for you.
I like the novelization. It's a very good novelization.
Yeah, you get that extra information. So
you do get extra information. Yes.
Okay, fine.
Now there is a that proposes that she ends up running 10 forward on the Enterprise E, which is really weird.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if I acknowledge that.
I don't mind.
But
I liked her character.
You liked her? Well, the four-handed piano player. Four-armed. Oh, what did I say?
Handed.
Four-handed.
But it's true. She does have four hands as well.
Right. So the
attached to arms. Sorry.
The four.
She might also have four legs. We couldn't tell.
The alien piano player is the ex-wife of the guy who the captain of the ship that exploded. So Riker's trying to get information from her, and she obviously wants to get paid in some way, and he says they have no money. So she's like, well, you're not giving me much, are you? And Riker says, well, why don't you move over and I'll show you a few a few licks that you haven't heard. And somehow that's enough. A few jazz tunes is enough currency for her to talk about a fat.
This is the thing I was thinking about, because would a person who has 4 to 6 hands that couldn't tell how many and is able to play like these amazing tunes really be interested in 2-hand Earth piano playing?
Right? Exactly. I mean, it's like, why is she so impressed? But she is, and actually Riker has a great line, because when he walks in and she goes something like, "Oh, a new face in town." And he responds, "Same face I've always had," which I thought was it's just such a great Riker.
There's some gems like that in this one, yeah.
There really are. And then later on, Worf walks into the bar. This is later on in the episode.
Melota.
And he's like, "Do you know any Klingon opera?" and we actually witness Worf singing Klingon opera. And she looks like, oh God, I have to play this crap? Okay. Here we go, Melot. He's like, Melota, Melota, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, you might have a future in Klingon opera.
In another life, I sang Klingon opera.
I feel like you could totally do it. You could totally pull off Klingon opera. It was very good.
Thank you. Well, all that manages to get them in connection, in meeting with Fat Ferengi. Who?
That's the feature I think that you notice most about him.
They keep mentioning, look for a fat Ferengi. So they call attention to that. It's like, look for a fat Ferengi who likes.
You're not weightest.
No, I'm not. That is, and actually, the novelization goes out of its way to also keep mentioning it's a fat Ferengi. So I guess Ferengis are not
typically fat.
Are not typically fat. I guess I don't know. Maybe they fat shame people on Ferengar and Ferenginar, and therefore it's unusual. I don't know.
Past the Ferengi because
they treat their women like crap. They don't let them wear clothes.
Right. So no, I wouldn't put it past the Ferengi.
Yeah.
Awful.
Right. So, anyways, this Ferengi. He's the one. He knows why the guy was collecting the Vulcan hardware, and he mentions some location that they were taking all this stuff to, and so this is reported back to Picard. Picard tells Riker, continue on this lead, and I'm going to see what happens with this meeting between Spock and the proconsul. Spock and the proconsul have the meeting.
What is a proconsul?
It's like a senator, isn't it?
I looked this up. According to Michael Okuda and Denise Okuda, the proconsul is the head of the Romulan Senate.
Oh,
like the majority leader, basically, is how I would like.
Okay.
The Speaker of the House.
The Speaker of the House. Okay.
So he's the
How many houses does the Romulan Congress have?
Is it bicameral?
There's a very dissatisfying explanation.
That's dissatisfying.
So all we know is that he is the head of the Senate and therefore one of the most powerful people on Romulus. But there's the head of the Romulan Star Empire is the Praetor.
Right.
The Praetor is dead. Sorry.
Right.
There's a famous audiobook that started that way. Can't remember which one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like a novelization.
No, I wonder which one.
It's in my head because
I haven't read that one.
I remember the voice actor going, "The Praetor is dead," and that's all I can remember about.
I want to read that one.
Anyways, go on.
So Spock is suspicious of after the meeting because everything the proconsul just promises everything. Like, yes, I'm going to announce this initiative, and I want you to be there. And everything's going to be roses. And Spock, it goes back, and he tells the underground.
Hugh Grant played this part, Spock would have been convinced, because I think Hugh Grant.
This is a good opportunity. I looked him up on IMDb.
What else has this magnificent actor done?
Well, not much, but he was in Quantum Leap before Star Trek.
Oh.
Okay.
He played in Deep Space Nine. He played a Romulan criminal.
Really? So he specializes in Romulans.
And he had one other appearance in Star Trek Voyager as an Ocampa man.
Oh, he's in the episode with Kirsten Dunst in Next Generation also. He'll be back, yeah. See there? Kirsten Dunst. And then there he is. So that's cool. I think it's called Dark Page. It's another episode. It's when Counselor
Dark Page, yeah.
Yeah, it's when Counselor Troy will start wearing a uniform, and I think it's another episode where she gets mentally violated somehow.
Mm.
It's
it's a theme.
That's nothing to be laughing about. But it happens to Counselor Troy a lot. Poor thing.
Poor thing.
She does happen again.
So back to the summary. We the Romulan underground, and throughout the episode we've been getting little snippets of this movement where there are Romulans who do want to reunify with Vulcan, and we learn that there's sort of they kind of exchange in they have Vulcan lore that they pass on to their children,
books,
and then the Vulcan alphabet cubes and all this stuff. So what Spock is true to in effect, and Picard sees this, but of course politically both are suspicious. And when Spock announces that this is what's going to happen, the underground is excited. But Picard immediately says, we can't trust this. This is
right. But then
we have to be cautious. And Spock says, well, I'm going to meet with him anyhow.
Well, he says either way, it would be in the interest of Starfleet and the Federation to know what they're up to. So I'm going to spring the trap.
Well, right. That's what he tells Picard after. Right. Yeah. Picard at first accuses him of being swayed by the crowd.
Right.
And then that's where we get the famous line, I believe, that Spock accuses him of speaking with Sarek's voice, like for the third time or something. The second time, and Spock gets a little. And again, Picard and Spock, they kind of spar a little bit. And they get kind of snippy with each other, and it's an interesting scene because it is kind of up for debate how much of Spock is actually trying to win one last argument with his father. And Picard even says, is it so important to win one last argument? And Spock has that line where he says, in the end, that's all we had. That's all we had, which is bittersweet.
That's really sad.
And well, of course it is a trap. And it's a trap. And it's all revealed to be a plot by none other than Sela.
And the Tal Shiar, right? Isn't she part of the Tal Shiar?
Yeah. And of course, Sela, we know, is the trans-dimensional child of Tasha Yar.
And a Romulan.
Yeah.
You're
not in camera.
I'm trying to be on both cameras.
I know.
Anyways, go.
Remember, we have a YouTube audience as well.
Yes, we do.
And yes. And anyhow, so they trap Data, Picard, and well, they ambush them in the caves because Pardek is revealed to be a traitor. And so they capture Spock.
Spock actually figures the whole thing out, and then that's when,
right.
And then that's when Sela says, "The great Ambassador Spock."
And so Sela is wants Spock to read the speech, and the speech will be read as
it's another great line. I wrote it down where he says,
"Oh, the Data line is great."
No, the Spock line. I use this all the time. Actually, where is it? Hold on, I wrote it down here.
It basically very intimates that she's going to kill him anyway.
Right, and he goes, "I choose not to cooperate," and I use that all the time. So.
Well, there's a great line where Sela says, "I don't get to write speeches much in this job, and I actually enjoy it." And Data goes, "Maybe you should maybe you should get another job. Maybe you should switch jobs." And the way Brent Spiner delivers it is just classic. And Sela just shoots him a glance like, "Shut up." And anyhow, so okay, and this is where the episode for me starts to go a little downhill.
Oh.
So their great plan is they're going to have Spock read the speech, and then they're going to send over
2,000
Romulan troops hidden in 3 Vulcan ships. And then now we learn why they were collecting Vulcan hardware is because they were building these Vulcan ships to cross the neutral zone, which the Enterprise happens to be at that point right now, because that's where the lead.
Right, they're starting to figure out.
Right. So they're there, and Picard's like, "Just hold off, let's see what happens." And Sela's like, "I want you to read the speech." Spock says, "I choose not to cooperate."
And that's when we get
that's where we get hologram Spock. And so they decide the best course of action is to just lock Spock, Data, and Picard in this proconsul's office. Which is just
because why not?
Because why not, right? And of course, and with access to all the technology that's in that office, so of course, Data and
it's another example of Romulan arrogance. I mean, they're so, they think that their shit don't stink, and that they're impenetrable plans, and of course they don't account for like
what do you say to this Romulan arrogance that he speaks of?
Well, why don't you finish your summary and then we can talk about it.
Yeah. So, well, no, I mean, he's right. The height of Romulan arrogance, they lock him in there, and of course they get out, and it's very anticlimactic. They make a really bad hologram of Riker and 2 random red shirts, and Sela walks in. He's like, "How did they escape?" And and they're shooting, and then they cloaked themselves with the holographic generator that they had previously shown is in the room when they created hologram Spock. And but no, Data and Spock use the Vulcan nerve pinch.
Picard actually punches the guy out.
Picard punch, which is rare for Picard.
Yeah.
Data gets a compliment on his use of Vulcan nerve.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. Spock is very proud of Data's nerve pinching abilities. And they just casually walk out of the room and out of the heart of the Romulan government, and get back into the city. I mean, we don't see this, but obviously it happens.
It's worth saying that the whole plan is kind of clever, in my opinion, which is they wanted to get these 2,000 Romulan troops onto Vulcan, and Picard's like, "What do you? That's stupid. We're gonna just come and extract them." She's like, "No, they're gonna be. It's guerrilla style. They're gonna I bet you these Romulans are ordered to basically be like Vikings and just kind of just
the impression is that this is like their commando squad just go in and
just get yourself in there, and then unification is forced upon them, and so it's like a kind of a I think it's actually kind of a good
I meant the bad plan was locking them in the office.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
That was
Well, yeah. Again, that's just Romulan arrogance. You just like blame that on that.
That was the part that I think nobody really thought that one through. Right. They're so focused on this invasion that they don't think about. Let's just put. I'm sure the Romulans have a prison somewhere, some kind of interrogation room or something.
They're just
that they can lock these people in with no access to technology.
Yeah, they don't even leave a guard behind.
They don't even leave a guard. They just casually walk really out.
The Romulans must not have a lot of resources.
Because they're all on those Vulcan ships.
They're all on the Vulcan ships. All the elite guard are on the Vulcan ships, so that's why.
Right.
That's why.
So
this
they get
an all or nothing plan.
Right. So well, Spock does manage before they casually walk out of the office. Spock records a message stating that this is all this is a ploy. Don't let those ships cross. And of course, and this is one of the best parts of the episode. The Enterprise is poised to engage, and then out of nowhere, a warbird decloaks and just flies and blasts all three ships out of existence.
Dirty.
And everybody on the Enterprise, and I think it's Troy, right? It's
everyone's like shocked.
They destroyed all 20,000 of their own men, and we're just sort of witness to
women serve in the
well,
forces as well.
I don't know if they said women.
No, they just said they just destroyed their 20,000 of their people, I think.
Did they say? Okay, all right. And
troops, yeah.
Troops, okay. And they just everybody's just kind of stunned at what the Romulans will stoop to hide this. And then the episode ends back in the caves, and Picard and Data obviously have to go home, and Spock's like, "No, I'm not going. I'm staying here." And Picard's like, "Okay, I guess." Well, he's what else am I? I mean, I can't make you. I guess.
But, Spock makes a great justification. He's like, now he realizes the whole reason he came to Romulus is it doesn't matter like that they can't do something big and like make a grand gesture towards reunification, but there are people who are hungry to and like need guidance to
which the episode showcases
to follow the ways of logic. And so Spock decides, since he himself has devoted his life and made the choice to go Vulcan rather than be human, he doesn't embrace his human half; he embraces his Vulcan self. And so he decides that he's going to stay behind and be a teacher to these revolutionary Romulans.
Right. So
Picard accepts that, and then
Picard he says, I offer you what I have of Sarek,
and then
from the mind, right? And then they
Lord Moore delivers a beautiful performance.
He has
beautiful
expression. Yeah.
So you're going to say something, Money.
So
okay. So I take issue with the plan of sending 2,000 Romulans to Vulcan.
I thought you would.
It's such a like desperate Hail Mary, unlikely to succeed event. It is profoundly un-Romulan to me, and I just like the Romulans are the masters of the game of chess. And this is like, I mean, it's sneaky, but like it is not a plan that's designed for success or the long-term benefit of the Empire. Well, so do you really think 2,000 troops are going to subdue a planet of 2 billion people that is in the heart of Federation space? Even if they slaughter the entire Vulcan High Command, like the Vulcans aren't just going to like bow to them.
Right. Let me ask you this: do you think, and now we're just speculating here beyond the show, do you think that perhaps this was okayed in order to get rid of Sela, because it is her plan, and she's not fully Romulan? I just always assumed that, because we never see the character again.
We don't.
No.
This is after her involvement with the Klingons, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We never see. We have a lot to talk about. This is the last time.
Realize we don't see Sela.
Yeah,
again.
This is the last time we see Sela as a character, which is disappointing, because I think there was a character. But obviously, you know, the Romulans being so xenophobic to a degree, I would think that they probably judged her harshly. And to her credit, she rose to the level that she did. But probably there were a lot of people who didn't like her. And I just assumed that this was just, you know, just as the episode The Traitor, where they leave, what's his name?
Right, they're always kind of challenging.
Yeah, there's like games within games within games. Right. It's like the Roman Senate, you know? It's
basically giving them enough rope to hang themselves with.
Right.
Right. So I kind of assumed that's
plausible. I like that.
Yeah.
Good explanation.
Like, otherwise, the best analogy I could come up with is like basically be like, it's not a perfect analogy, but France sending 2,000 shock troops into Louisiana because 500 years ago, Louisiana was part of France and they were related in some
We need New Orleans back now.
Even though it's pretty nice. Louisiana is part of this vast empire of powerful forces in the world. There's with 2,000 troops to watch them from the United States.
Well, let me
That's
see.
That's
really good. I mean, they could send the French Foreign Legion, right? They could go occupy New Orleans.
But I think what would be successful about that plan is the French would integrate and reproduce with the local population as the French are wont to do. So maybe the Romulans were going to do the same thing. So. I mean, they're famous. The French are famous for being the best lovers.
Okay.
So
I think right now with all the turmoil with
that was a great connection.
With all the turmoil with the Trump presidency, now there is never a better time for that plan.
There has never
you know, the French they have their opportunity right now. They can do it. I believe in them.
So, but that aside, I don't want to make it look like I dislike the episode. But it's like what
right.
Episodes in the canon, but I just like upon a second view, or second, I hadn't seen it in a long time like that. Just like the plan doesn't sit as well with me as it used to.
No, and I think that might be part of the reason. You know, both episodes, and this is why I insisted to review them both individually. Is both the two episodes are written by two different people. Part one was Jerry Taylor, who novelized the episode, but then part two was Michael Piller, I believe, and she's on record as saying that she had the better of the two jobs.
Michael Piller's a man.
Yes.
Why'd you say she? Oh, Jerry Taylor.
Jerry Taylor had. Yeah, she had the better of the two. No, it's not a Michael Burnham situation.
I was confused. Sorry.
And she had the easier task because her whole thing was setting up the gambit, but then Pillar had to actually come up with what is going on? What is the MacGuffin? I think that's where if you want to look at it as a two-parter, I mean, as one whole thing, that's where it all kind of falls apart, because the Romulan plan is not very.
But had they succeeded and landed,
but they wouldn't have.
Yeah.
I mean, it just wouldn't have worked.
Right. It's right.
I mean, how far? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. What was the plan? They were going to fly those 3 Vulcan ships, and nobody was going to stop them. Are you kidding me? How far is Vulcan from the neutral zone?
I mean, Vulcan must be in the heart of Federation. Like, it is one of the it's just like, yeah.
It's bizarre, to say the least.
Fragility, to be sure.
It really does. It makes you really question Sela's, tactical ability, because, I mean, what the hell was she thinking? That's more than a Hail Mary. It's pure insanity. And so the episode falls apart in that regards. And let me just preface this by saying that I don't consider it a 10.
What?
Yeah. So there's going to be controversy here. I'm going to court controversy.
I see why you said this, Humbert, because after seeing the second episode, it's like it's not a 10 in my mind. But certainly, like, if overlooking the plan and viewing it as a whole, like with Leonard Nimoy and all the excellent moments with Picard and Sarek, like it still holds a special place in my heart. So
it does.
Okay, so but like just I mean maybe they got as far as the writers are concerned and the production team, maybe they got the scale of the invasion wrong for it to be plausible. But like I think that like the idea itself had it on a larger scale, perhaps, or maybe a little bit more intricate. Like, what if like there were already ships in Federation space posing as it could have just been more intricate. You're right. You guys are right about that. But I will say that like it is forgivable because I think one can just imagine that there is a slight chance of success.
Not really.
I mean, I was like, even if you land on the Vulcan capital and succeed in seizing the entire government and slaughtering all of them, I still don't think it succeeds.
Or what if these 2,000 troops are posing as like, or what if they're like, genetically altered to look like, Vulcans instead of Romulans?
But they know they're Romulans. They announce it in the speech.
That's right. Anyway, I'm just trying to justify.
Yeah, look, it doesn't work. The other thing that doesn't work is locking Picard and Spock and Data in the room. That's just absolutely ridiculous. I have great sentimental love for the episode. Obviously, yes, the highlights are that we get to finally see. I mean, for us, it was to see.
Well, we see Romulus.
We see Romulus,
which we'd never
seen Romulus.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that.
This is the first time we see Romulus,
right. And we get that beautiful map painting of the Romulan center of government with
which is gorgeous.
Yeah, that circular design with the spires, and like they even stay true to that in Nemesis. It's a much better upgraded version, but it's basically the same beautiful capital city. I've often dreamt actually of living on Romulus because I think it's so pretty and it's depicted so beautifully.
Living in Romulus?
I have not.
You have not? No Romulan
What Star
dreams?
Trek world that you've seen would you like to live on? That you've seen so far?
I'm not sure. I mean, Vulcan
Vulcan is pretty cool.
Yeah. I feel like there are a lot of like individual episodes in the original show that are really beautiful.
Yes, that's true. But the episode has great sentimental value. With seeing Spock, the both actors rise to the occasion in terms of Nimoy and Stewart. They really just riff off each other really, really well.
It's actually really delightful to see Picard trying to just Picard going up against him intellectually and things like that. But there was also a really sweet scene with Data and Spock on the Klingon ship.
That's right.
Data's working on a side project. He's trying to hack into the Romulan central computer core. And at one point, Spock comes and joins him, and Spock is the one who actually successfully breaks into the Romulan computer core. But during that scene, it's fun because Data's asking him all kinds of questions, and he comes to the conclusion that he's like, it's interesting that you have intentionally abandoned the very thing that I'm searching for.
Right.
And then he says, like, he asked him, he's like, in your life's journeys, do you regret not being, is there something that you like, what do you feel about not embracing your human side? And he goes, I have no regrets. And Data says, well, that's interesting because that's a human expression. He goes, fascinating. It's like, and he just kind of like, so I thought that was like a really cool moment. And again, it's like this kind of like, these kind of moments like are what create this like really strong connection. You for the first time, even though we had Dr. McCoy in the first episode in the pilot, it's only a cameo. Here with Spock working together with this crew, it creates like these like, I guess, relationships between them that
right.
kind of like feel natural, and it makes you feel good. It's like, oh wow, like this character's lived on in this way, you know.
And not only that, is that Spock and they show that Spock and Data are basically perfect. Completely dispassionate and having no emotion is truly the true Vulcan ideal, which Spock has always struggled with, just being half human. And even all Vulcans do, for that matter.
Right.
They suppress emotions that would otherwise naturally exist. Whereas in Data, who starting from that point is trying to cast all that off and achieve his humanity.
Now, let me ask all of you what you think about, because with Nimoy returning to the role, I mean, with any actor returning to a role after, obviously he played it on the original show, a long period of time went by, you come back to a role, you have to recreate it. Sometimes actors recreate a role more successfully than others. But with Nimoy and Spock, there's always so much more nuance every time he comes back. I mean, I feel. How do you think his performance as Spock in this episode, like, how does it compare to, say, original movies Spock? And
I haven't seen the original movie.
Well, like him in the original, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's the original movie?
The original crew movies,
right?
And the 2009 Spock.
I think
we see. How do you think Unification Spock fits into that?
I think he's note perfect, and again, like, what's valuable about Leonard Nimoy's contributions to all of Star Trek is that we do get this like interesting like journey of both the character and the actor aging. It's like him playing old Spock is just like beyond delightful. Like, I can't get enough of Leonard Nimoy. What I mean? Like he's just such a fine actor. And then Spock is always like kind of teaching. I think Spock has always been used as a teaching tool for the audience, and I think that like he somehow teaches you how to govern your passions, how to like, Spock's the one who's always kind of like helping us, the human audience, like see another way, like a better way to be, perhaps, and I think Data certainly does that, but Spock is just like, Spock is, I think, more apt because he, like a human, like we all have to struggle with our emotions, like, in many ways, like we're not like totally like Vulcans where we want to just like completely cast off our emotions, but like a big thing that every human works on is how to express themselves in a way that's not angry, or how to control your anger,
right?
How to like stave off depression, how to like be not too happy either. Like there's like the ideal of humanity in general is to be like balanced, and like so it's not too far off from Vulcans, although we love our emotions. We also do try to not let them get the better of us.
Do you think he's more, do any of you think that he's a little more emotional? I mean, in the sense of like, do you think there's maybe a little bitterness or anger in this portrayal as opposed to other appearances?
So it's been a long time since I've watched the original series, and this has reminded me that I have to do that soon. But I think in the original series there were a lot more moments of underscoring the humanity that lies beneath Spock's Vulcan exterior, and he would have moments of weakness and express complete emotion. Joy. Like one thing that sticks out in my mind is like there's an episode where he thinks Kirk is dead.
Yeah.
And he sees Kirk, he's like, Jim!
Right.
Outbursts like that. So to me, like Spock has become more even keeled in his old
He's
age.
like a master at this point.
Yeah.
He truly has gone through the Vulcan process, and so what we're seeing is like Jedi Master Spock, if you will. But I also think that like I did sense something that you were talking about, but I would say, to use like a more modern vernacular perhaps, is that in TNG episode era Spock, he gives no shits. Like he's pretty much like You know, like he's pretty much like, I don't, you know, like whatever, Picard, I'm gonna do what I want. Like, you know, you're not like, I was doing this when you were in diapers. Like, don't.
That is one of the best lines.
That's a great line.
I was excavating the cowboy diplomacy before you were born.
That's a great line.
It's like a really good line. So I think that's the thing that instead of bitterness, I would say he's more like just like,
okay,
you know, step aside, you know,
right.
Well, how old are you? 20, like 40? Yeah, it's like that kind of thing.
All right, here's another question is, okay, with this, obviously, you know, with Star Trek 4, one of the things I loved about Star Trek 4 was that ending where Sarek and Spock finally seem to reconcile
right
at the end, and there's that wonderful line from Sarek about, you know, he says your choice of friends is
oh yeah, he approves.
I approve of your choice of friends, or something right. to that effect, and you know, they give each other the Vulcan salute, and it's really one of the most beautiful moments, I think, in the entire Trek canon. Now with these 2 episodes, you see that it wasn't the end. They did once again grow apart. How do you all feel about that? You know, I lived with that ending of Star Trek 4 for so long until Unification. I wasn't expecting that Spock and Sarek weren't going to reconcile. And I think it's a very honest, and I think it was very daring on the part of the writers. I think it does add a lot of drama to the story, and it's something that I think it's one of the highlights. But it is very sad, and I was wondering, what do you guys think? Do you guys prefer that it would have stayed like in Star Trek 4, or do you like what happened with this, where they really didn't, they never settled their differences. Sarek passes away, and you know, all he gets is the mind meld from Picard, and you know.
I mean, I think it's honest. I think
it is a little bit sad, and sometimes that it was daring on the part of the scriptwriters, and I think I agree that it did add more to the plot of this particular episode. But sometimes I feel like they forget, or I feel like they've forgotten the scale of time that has passed since you know, Star Trek 4. You know, I forget the exact length of time, but it's like at least 100 years, right?
80 years.
It's 80 years.
It's 80 years, but they allude to the fact that the split happened before, because they mentioned the Cardassians.
The Cardassian War, yeah.
Right, which happened just prior to Next Generation, right?
I think it's just really honest, as Emma and you guys are all kind of saying. But I will call out Rian Johnson again, because here we have another situation where, you know, just like in Star Wars The Last Jedi, you know, we don't expect Luke to be this bitter old hermit living on an island. We expect him to be, you know, like the Luke we left on Return of the Jedi. So I think Rian Johnson borrowed again from Star Trek to write The Last Jedi. So I'm calling you out, Rian Johnson. But no, I do think it's always a very precarious thing when you're messing with like these iconic sort of, what happened?
There's some drama.
It's very precarious what's happening here.
Speaking of precarious, there's
it's
off camera drama, but it's fine. Picard and Spock are barely hanging on. Anyways, but what I do think is that like when you have these iconic characters and you have these beautiful resolutions, like you could have ended their story in Star Trek 4 and it would have been just fine.
Right.
Is what you're saying basically. And I do agree with that.
You don't always get a happy ending.
Yeah, but you don't always get a happy ending. I do think though that like one thing that the episode goes out of its way to like show is that like Spock and Sarek had this like contentious relationship, but both of them still loved each other very much, and you can see that in the you know, in the like, you definitely see that clearly. And I think that's where the
the poignancy of the
poignancy of it is, but that's where it's forgivable. Like it doesn't. There is still a emotion. You know, they're both in the end, they're both reminded how much they loved each other because in Sarek's dying scene, he says to Picard, "Let him know, like tell Spock how much I loved him."
Right.
And in this, you know, and then when he melds with it, you know, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. But like when Leonard Nimoy chooses to like cry, basically, that's like a huge deal, you know, that Spock. So when you do see it, you're like immensely moved by it. And so I think that like also there's this like Vulcan mysticism involved, where in a sense, like Picard being the holder of Sarek's Katra, in a sense, which is exactly what's happening. Like in a real sense, for Spock and for other Vulcans, there is communion after death, and I think that that's what's occurring in that scene.
Right.
Is he is having the opportunity to commune with his father, or the essence of his father in some sense. Which, by the way, leads me to another point that I think is very interesting, and I've said this in our Star Trek J.J. Abrams discussion. So when Sarek mind melded with Captain Picard, well, let's go all the way back to McCoy, right? McCoy mind melds. Mind melds with Spock and gains part of Spock's vast knowledge, right?
Okay.
Then Sarek mind melds with Captain Kirk, and they exchange knowledge, right? Wait. So then Spock now. Okay, so in a sense, Picard had those memories of Kirk, those like engrams of Kirk's memories, right? And then when he melded with Picard leveled up in a sense, because now he has like these experiences of both Sarek and Kirk downloaded into his brain because of the way this whole thing works, right? And now Spock is re-downloading all that information, and then he later melds with Kirk again in the Kelvin universe. So Kirk is like has Picard. Kelvin Kirk has Picard, Sarek, Spock, and McCoy all in him in a sense. So Captain Kirk, Chris Pine's Captain Kirk is like the uber Captain Kirk ever in Star Trek. What do you guys think of that?
I miss the music, the mind meld music. Why don't they do the?
It's true. It assumes nothing is lost in the transfer. Very good. That's true. That's very good. Wow, you know that music really well. By the way, in the previous episode, when I forgot to mention this, but you guys are ponfaring in front of us.
Not in front of the Klingon.
Okay. Yeah, let's keep. This is PG-13 here. No ponfar on camera. But what I was gonna say is, in the previous episode, one thing you brought up music. I like that awesome crescendo you get when Spock comes out in the end, and then at the end of this episode, you could tell it's Dennis McCarthy because you hear the Star Trek Generations style themes at the end of this episode as well. So I thought that was good. The music was really good in this episode and previous.
What do you guys all think of Spock's garb in the episode? His Romulan look.
Shoulder pads.
Well, he's wearing casual. I mean, one assumes that he came over like on a photon torpedo or something. Like, how was he like
a photon torpedo?
Yeah,
I don't think this figure is not accurate to the size of his shoulder pads in the show.
No, they're much larger in the episode. That is correct. You're right, babe. Yeah.
But one is, I mean, like, too. You can't really like.
Spock has great eyeshadow.
It's like if I were like, I don't know, if I were gonna be, I'm an ambassador. I'm trying to go into a hostile territory. I'm not gonna take like luggage with me. So I'm sure he relied on. He was hoping, or like he just assumed, like I'll just get clothing when I'm there. And so Romulans have style.
This is the perfect segue for this page.
Oh, great. That's awesome. All of the uniforms.
Oh, so the old uniforms had shoulder pads too. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but not like the 80s shoulder pads.
They reduced them in Nemesis.
They do. They're more pointed, aren't they? They're like shorter and more pointed.
Something happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like less. They're just lessened.
I like the giant shoulder
Are you
pads.
guys still there?
It's my
Yeah.
favorite.
Can you hear us? Did I mute you by accident?
I can't hear you.
It's accidentally muted you, I think. Can you hear us now?
I don't think so.
Do you hear us now?
Yeah.
Okay. I may have accidentally muted you.
So you like the
us.
larger shoulder pads?
Yes. I
Okay.
approve.
All right. So
Can we take a poll? Those of you who prefer the larger shoulder pads.
Speaking of polls, if you hold this for a second, hold Moni. That's so weird that we're holding you. Like Moni's in our arms. That's cute. I have a follow-up to our previous discussion.
I can barely hear you.
Oh, I have a follow-up to because you're here. I guess you got to hold him in the corners. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So in our previous discussion, we talked about the Star Trek Discovery trailer. Not in the previous one, but the last one before we talked about.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And I was arguing that people watching Star Trek Discovery, fans who are you can just point them there. So fans who are new to Star Trek Discovery, I guess that like a small percentage, maybe 20% or less, would actually go on to watch other Star Trek shows. And you and Sean were saying that
we were arguing against that.
That they thought that was preposterous. So I ran a poll on Twitter, and I have the results here.
Okay.
And I wanted to show you. So the question I asked was, and you can tell me if this is a fair question. Okay. I'm curious if Star Trek Discovery was your intro to Star Trek, and if you enjoyed it, did it also lead you to watch more Star Trek? If so, please let me know in the comments what you watched next, and please retweet this to get a good sample size. So 43 people voted, and of the 43 people, 65% said yes, that it did lead them to watch other Star Trek shows, that they're totally went on to watch other Star Trek shows. 7% said no, I only like Discovery. And 28% said they're thinking about it.
But how would they know if they only like Discovery if they haven't seen other shows?
And so I found this out. Well, I found this out in talking to someone who answered. They said that they can't watch the other shows because they're too cheesy. So there's a factor of like where they're like, oh, it doesn't seem realistic enough. So Star Trek Discovery is hitting this like, but again, it's still a small percentage of
But you also
people.
didn't ask it specifically to only people who've only seen Discovery.
I did. I said if Star Trek Discovery was your intro to Star Trek.
It's kind of hypothetical though.
No, it's like if Star Trek Discovery is your first Star Trek show, your intro to Star Trek.
It says,
and if you enjoyed it,
okay.
Did it also lead you to watch more Star Trek?
I think people who have seen the other shows are answering that.
No, and some of them even in the comment section said, this doesn't apply to me, but I'll retweet it to see if we can get some more answers. So yeah. Then on Instagram, I also shared that message, and then we got actual. This is interesting too. I won't pull it up. I'll show you guys later offline. But the vast majority of them went on to TNG, and then second was DS9, and so in terms of what the next Star Trek series they watch was, and then the last one, sadly, there was only one vote for Enterprise. Sorry,
poor Enterprise.
Yeah, poor
I love Enterprise.
Well, yeah, I love Enterprise too, and
Archer is my favorite captain.
But I mean, I think, I mean that's a good start, but I still feel that.
So you're wrong though. Discovery is a gateway drug for the rest of Star Trek.
Not if they don't. I mean, maybe they'll give. I mean, they could have watched one episode and then not continued watching. You know?
Oh yeah, I mean, like,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking
that
about true fans. How many people are gonna watch?
The 65% said yes, they're addicted. That was the answer that I gave them. So yeah.
How many people are watching Discovery who haven't seen other Star Trek shows though? Since it's on the platform, it is
a record number.
Like, you
apparently,
have to choose.
Yeah.
To pay for that specific platform.
That's a good point, but a record number apparently. Because I happen to know that people. So at work, I found out
it has to be right. It has to be a record number because the only time it's happened.
Well, also,
wait, is it only streaming or is it airing on the cable?
No, it's only on streaming, except in Canada where it does air on television.
Oh, Canada.
Yeah, and then so So then in the other thing I found out, and this I found out from work, is a bunch of people subscribe to CBS for sports because you can watch the sports through the CBS thing, right? Okay. And they said to me, they're like, oh yeah, I've seen that Star Trek Discovery pop up on my CBS. I might watch it. So it's similar to like the Spike dilemma.
Oh my god, yeah, it's so crazy that Star Trek has always been associated with like wrestling.
I know. That's so awkward.
It's weird.
Voyager had The Rock on an episode because wrestling was before Voyager. Yes. You remember that?
On the Paramount Network.
And I was like, this is, I'm not that audience.
But
what's going on?
But see, like my point is that like I think it is important to include people that are not the typical Star Trek audience, because I think that the value of Star Trek, and I'm not saying that Discovery, I don't think Discovery's there yet in terms of the level at which the other Star Trek series did this, but I have to say that I think Voyager, in my opinion, is a true template of what a Star Trek show should be, even though we don't necessarily care for some of the the reusing of previous tropes. But what I would say is that, like, it's nice that like a person who's interested in wrestling may then discover Star Trek, and then it would open their mind to some of the ideals that like Star Trek tries to espouse, which are open-mindedness, inclusion, collaborating, like just science and exposing people to science. Who knows how many of those folks could have gone on to become scientists, and then because wrestling doesn't last very long as a career, but who knows?
Hey, Hulk Hogan.
Yes, it's true.
And a very long-lived career.
And The Rock. I think it's cool, anyways. That. So I say you're wrong. The poll clearly shows a trend towards adoption of other Star Trek shows.
So not many of those people went to the original show either.
No, surprisingly. And so that was the main comment.
No respect
there
for
was
history.
No respect for history.
And I'm sorry. True. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that I didn't remember your screen name, but there was a really cool discussion on that thread where someone said, I just can't watch the original series, like the way they treat women, for example, like treatment of women, things like that.
That's why Kirk is not my favorite captain.
Right.
But of course, they forget the original context in which the original series was produced, in which it was like extremely, it was pushing boundaries to an extent, like it was the first interracial kiss.
Right.
Well, and if you watch Star Trek, the original series as a whole, despite using some colloquial, or I guess what would it be, temporal colloquialisms, if you will, like the writers didn't go as far beyond as they could, but who could really, like in those days, like it was very much a reality that like, women weren't in the workplace as much as they are now and things like that. So I think Star Trek tried its best, considering that like, the mindset of the time was so different than it is today. So within that, they were breaking those mindsets. So but I do see that though, like how could someone who's never grown up with analog, let's say, right, really appreciate analog anymore? You know what I mean? Like I feel like Star Trek the original series eventually will be a museum piece, and I think that's the thing that's sad, but it's also just true. Like eventually nothing in the original series will like be a fight anymore. Like we're already there, kind of, I mean, like we're moving in this, we've already conquered a lot of the problems that the original series was addressing. Next Generation's still very relevant, but I'm saying, like
slide back into the dark ages.
Unless we slide back into the dark ages,
right? Well, and I agree with that, and to the extent that as a Whovian, I know that there are people, even I have trouble watching some of the early Hartnells and stuff, and that's always been like one of the big debates in Doctor Who fandom, is people not wanting to go back and watch the stuff from 1963 and the black and white. So I do understand that, the cardboard sets and all that. I can watch it, and I do, and I appreciate it. But like you said, eventually it'll be a museum piece. And I know people who love Doctor Who, but I've never watched anything prior to Eccleston. And my point is that I feel you can still do what Enterprise did, the show Enterprise, which is offer something that looks modern but yet is faithful to the visual aesthetic of what has come before. I mean, like you said, I know that you're bothered that they didn't have the.
I'm just bothered with prequel series in general. Like, I think it's a waste of time
I know
to go backwards. I think just keep moving these shows forward. It's your best bet of being relevant.
And I agree with that 100%.
Your best bet of being relevant is to just do new things. Like,
and Star Trek is equipped for that.
Yeah,
you can just
Star
keep going
Trek's set
forward
up for that. Like, yeah,
it is.
Like, there's no real reason.
There's no reason
to spend any time in the past,
right?
At all. Just
really,
like, vault it and go on.
Yeah, vault it and go on. Right, just keep going, keep going, and keep going.
Yeah,
and there's really no reason to. Yeah,
the whole
I agree
idea
with
of
you.
nostalgia to me is that like is to
go. Right.
You can't have nostalgia for something you didn't live through. And so it's like these shows like Discovery and Enterprise are feeding off of a nostalgia for the original series, which the only thing that satisfies that nostalgia is the original series.
Well, to bring it back to the episode.
They're so divorced from the original series anyway. It's like what they're not even successfully harnessing the nostalgia.
Right. Well, to get back to the episode, I think the role of nostalgia is what we saw in Unification, which is on occasion you do something like Unification where you bring back an older actor, an older character, put the character in a more up-to-date context
and have them deal with that.
Then the newer characters react to the older character, and you pay homage, and that I believe is the correct way of handling that issue, in the sense of like, yes, you want to indulge in nostalgia and that's the whole point of prequels, really, if you ask me, is to just, oh, look, with updated technology, what this would look like. No. Just bring older characters back, put them in the new context, deal with it, add more layer and character, but keep moving forward. And Unification, I think, does that in a great way. I mean, it took a character, it took Spock, and repositioned him for the future, really. I mean, if Next Generation had wanted to, if they had been able to, they could have gone back to Romulus at some point. I mean, like, where was Spock during Nemesis, or DS9, or DS9 or whatever. I mean, it could have happened. I mean, there's I have a novel right here where it's Romulan, Garb, Spock, and Old Bones. I mean, they did the right thing. They took these characters and they brought them forward, and it was great for the older fans. And then for the newer fans, who had just started with Next Generation, they're like, oh, that's Spock. Oh, okay, I get it. And that's why I think Unification was so successful. I mean, it truly unified.
Oh yeah,
I think it finally unified.
That's
the original fans. And I'm thinking like people like when your dad said, "Oh,
the torch and encounter at Starfleet."
What's that?
You treat her like a lady.
That's really good.
That's a great McCoy impression.
Yeah, this further, I think.
But this cemented it, because there are people online who say, well, they never mention McCoy by name.
It's true, they don't.
They don't. They only say he's the admiral, and Picard, passes a thing in French, a message back in French to him, right? Isn't it? Or no, that was the captain of the Hood.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Never mind.
Data is the one again, which is kind of cute that Data is there with McCoy, and then Data
because he's the Spock surrogate, right?
Like that,
But yeah, I think
that's right. Doesn't he ask if he has pointy ears or something?
Right. He goes. I don't see any. He goes. I don't see any pointed ears, but you sure sound like a Vulcan.
I don't see any points on your ears, boy, but you sound like a Vulcan.
That's right. I like that he becomes more country doctor.
Yeah, he's more southern all of a sudden in his old age.
He's probably reverting to his childhood.
It happens, does it? Yeah. It does. Indeed. I think. I mean, is there anything else you'd like to?
So according to my notes here, let me see. Will you hold money? Thank you.
Of course.
Let's see here.
Show him more figures.
Oh, I liked again when the first scene, he's like, Picard's just basically like, you know, it's not satisfactory that you, you know, the whole cowboy diplomacy thing was good. Let's see.
Eric.
I did like out the movement on Romulus was, but I didn't like that we never hear about it again. So that is true. It's like you do see this, like what a neat thing to be answered. Really, he can't see because the camera's on the other side.
Well,
like,
he can see.
he can see it over there. That's true.
What?
Sarek is loving.
You mean he's just seeing my chest?
No.
I see Sarek.
Okay. I was like, what? Okay.
So the whole movement on Romulus I thought was very interesting, and I think that like it's a shame that we don't get a follow up to that. Perhaps in the novels we do, as you say, but it would have been neat to see that. Like in Nemesis, it would have been cool if there was like a scene, perhaps that maybe Commander Denatra, who comes to save the day, she might have been a Spock, you know, influenced Romulan, and so there's like softening with humans as well. Let's see what else I have here. Data hacks into the Romulan computers. We already talked about that. That was another good scene when Data banters with the Klingon captain, you know, and he's you know, he's just like the Klingon captain's like basically saying no to everything, and Data keeps, you know, giving him all these like compelling reasons why. He's like, what do you mean? We've been trying to hack into the Romulan core. Don't even bother. And he's like, I have certain skills that are unique to me or whatever. And so
and then of course he's one up to by Spock, which is the best part.
Yeah.
Right.
I love the line where Picard and Spock are arguing in the cafe, and he says like, Picard says, how can you reshape the Romulan landscape? How can you expect to possibly reshape the Romulan landscape? And Spock picks up that orchid or that flower, and he goes, one can reshape a landscape simply with one flower. You know, like he's like just putting one flower into a landscape is already reshaping it. So it's a really neat thing, kind of like, you know, Spock is absolutely right, but it's the more wise kind of patient outlook. And, you know, you could see a little bit of like, you know, Picard maybe has to like break a little bit of his own, like, you know, indoctrination or beliefs or like things like that, which is kind of cool. I love that there's just that scene where they're walking through the city, talking about how the next generation doesn't tolerate the prejudices of the previous generation. And that's like an absolute truism. And we see that more evident in the backlash against these, like, you know, we have with our current administration, there's this like movement, the basis of that movement is make America great again. It's like this whole idea of like going back to a time that was like perhaps, you know, viewed as simpler, but there's this huge, enormous backlash because people aren't allowing the wool to be pulled over their heads. They're like, it actually is greater now, than things are better now than they've ever been. We don't want to go back. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's like a wonderful parallel. And I think it's like, even though we're facing it in such a like really dramatic way at the moment, it's a struggle that humans, and I think it would be true for any civilization, is that like the protocols of the past don't always stay relevant for the next generation.
Speaking on that point, I'm thinking now, you know, Star Trek 6, when it came out,
was that way as well. Yeah.
The thing that they were citing was, of course, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union, and that was, you know, the peril of the Klingons and all that stuff. With Unification, you know, I think at the time I was thinking, you know, weren't we still in the midst of the two Germanys coming together after the war? They had just
years before,
right? So that I think was kind of an underlying subtext to the episode. You know, these, you know, East Germany and West Germany. I mean, when you really think about what it took to bring those two countries together, and they're still going through. I think they're still going through growing pains. But I mean, certainly the idea of reunifying Vulcans and Romulans, must have that must have been something that the writers were thinking about. Is, here we see something that we didn't think we were going to see anytime soon, and that wall just came down, and boom, all of a sudden we've got a Germany unified, and the idea of okay, Romulans and Vulcans together. So I know that was going on at the time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take him back.
All right, there you go.
So yeah, other than that, I think again, like what's profound about this episode is that at the time it was a very poignant and important episode because it tied in, as we have discussed here, the two kind of generations, if you will, a unified Star Trek, if you will, if there was the fissure, that may have been, occurring between the old original series fans and the next gen fans. But then further, it gives the Kelvin timeline adoption relevancy, and like it makes you feel like, like as I said, like, that is kind of like what one can assume that Spock has been on Romulus this whole time. And even, the whole thing that leads him to get stuck in the Kelvin timeline is he's trying to help the Romulans by preventing a supernova of the sun. A hypernova, actually.
Hypernova, right.
So yeah, so I love it. I think this is like the most fixed point in Star Trek in Star Trek history, and I think it's like just again an unrateable experience. Like overall, with even with the critiques, like I think that like in my heart, I can't give it anything except the highest possible rating.
So then you're rating it.
Yeah, but it's infinity, like the highest possible rating in like,
okay, 10 represents infinity in our rating system.
Fine, 10 then.
You're giving it a 10.
An 11.
Okay, it's 11. All right.
One more than infinity.
All right, are you agreeing with him? It's infinity, or
I disagree with infinity.
All right, could you care to give a numerical rating?
I think I'm gonna give it a 9.
A 9.
I don't know. I think I'm not as attached to Next Generation characters, so I think it may not be, as meaningful for me. But I love to see Spock again, and I think he's very good in this episode, and Ian Sarek and everyone gives an amazing performance here.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't really get a chance to answer your question earlier, but I think it's really interesting to see Spock like later in the movies and in the show here. I think you get kind of more like a complex and complete character when you see him later versus the way they did television in the 60s, and it was more of like, one-off episodes. And a lot of the time I think you use his volcanism and his character like just for a storyline, and all of a sudden you'd see him break the volcanism. That was interesting, but you used to see a more complete, emotional and non-emotional character,
right?
in the movies and the show.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I would like to see more Spock in the first episode, but it was cool. Like, I mean, that's something also we don't have with television, or if you're watching it on Netflix or whatever now. Like the end of the last episode, you only see Spock for a minute, and like you expected to see Spock more, and like that kind of, suspense that we just don't have anymore, that I think made television awesome.
Yeah,
and I still try to watch some television that way when I can.
Like
but
giving it a little space.
It's hard, yeah.
Yeah, like Stranger Things.
Yeah, I watched I watched Alias like in reruns, but I would like, and then I did get the DVDs, but I would still give it a week because I think that's
to my sister.
important.
She loves Alias.
I love it.
It is a great show.
Yeah, just like those cliffhangers, I think, that's something we can't really have as much, hardly ever now.
That's true. The nature of the cliffhanger, and it was one of the best cliffhangers.
It is still happening though, because the show, I love the show The Expanse, which I highly recommend everyone in this discussion watch The Expanse. I'm giving it a plug. It's available on, if you have an Amazon Prime membership, you can watch it on your Prime account, all of the current seasons. I think there's 3 of them so far, and the 4th season's coming out. But that was a weekly show, and like it totally has that, like if you're current with it, so catch up before season 4, I feel like you do get those thrills even more than
Yeah.
like Game of Thrones does. I thought The Expanse is even more like nerve-wracking and exciting than that is. And then when you do binge watch it, because I didn't see it from the beginning, I did have to catch up. It's also still like you just can't stop. It's like that skit with the Battlestar Galactica DVDs on Portlandia where they just can't stop watching and they lose their jobs and everything because they can't stop watching Battlestar Galactica. Have you seen that?
No,
I'll show it to you after. But anyways, to that was a really good point. And one thing we often talk about is how Star Trek Discovery isn't like the format we're so used to with Star Trek. It's trying to be a newer format.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do it differently. Like with Stranger Things, it is more like a movie, so I mean, they do it for that format.
Yeah.
Drama instead of, or it's a fluid drama instead of an
episodic.
Yeah.
Right.
Series.
So, what say you about this episode?
Oh, so for all the sentimental reasons, it's sort of in the pantheon of like those very special episodes, like Family and
Inner Light.
The Inner Light, yeah. But so ignoring my criticisms about the Romulan plan and how it's thwarted, it's one of my favorite episodes of the series. I may have to bifurcate it like Humbert did and give the first one a 10 and the second one, I'll decline to rate. But
Thank you. He knows I'll be arguing with him till the end of time.
I don't want. I just deeply conflicted because I don't want to detract from its significance by giving it a lower rating, but I also can't give it a 10. So I will decline to rate it.
You choose not to cooperate.
I will say it's the first. There's so many amazing things. It's the first, setting aside that we see that we have Spock and Sarek and Picard and all the things that come with that. It's the first time we see Romulus, and like as I was mentioning, like the Romulans hold a special place in my heart as like a worthy and true nemesis of the Federation and a foil for them. But I don't think like since the first appearance with Mark Leonard as the Romulan commander, we've ever had an episode that sort of like lived up to.
It's true.
That sort of served as the full expression of all the Romulans and their potential as an adversary. Like, you don't have this like, but it just seems so botched in this episode. And the Nemesis also doesn't do the Romulans justice. I think we're still waiting for, and this is a plea for future producers, we're still waiting for a truly worthy episode to portray the Romulans in their fullest potential.
I echo that, and I know there have been previous episodes on this where I've said that, it just seemed like the Romulans were set up as possibly being the big bad for Next Generation, and it just never happened. The Borg came about and captured the imagination of the fans, with good reason. But I feel that somehow that thwarted the Romulans from really becoming the number one nemesis for that was unintended, for the Next Generation. And I wanted also to just pick up on what you were saying, Emma, about real quickly about the loss of being able to see these things as they were with the cliffhangers. Because I mean, when we saw Spock, in that last moment, we had like
finger.
We had I think I don't even think it was I think we may have had 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or something, because
it
was
a small hiatus.
Right, it was like a small hiatus, and then we got the next one. That, I mean, I cannot communicate to you just because, I mean, there was nothing. I mean, it's not like today where you can go to Amazon and see the next episode, or you can go online and you can read rumors or anything. We had nothing. Okay, we had the episode. There was nothing else to do. Yeah. There was truly nothing. And I remember watching that with my brother and with my dad. And that's the other thing, is that with streaming, you choose when you want to watch things.
Yeah.
But when now, back then, Next Generation was at 7:00.
Well, to be
on
fair,
Saturdays.
So to be fair,
and if you wanted to watch it, you had to sit down or tape it.
Right.
But somebody had to be there.
To be fair, Star Trek Discovery is set up that way. I mean, like, you get a new episode weekly, and then they took a hiatus, and then
but you can wait it out and then binge watch it. Where we
had to wait. There was like the VHS.
There was no other way to see it.
There was really no other way, affordable way. I mean, maybe the VHSs cost what? They cost
like $50.
Remember?
They sold it like as individual episodes.
Yeah, it was terrible. You couldn't get them all.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, you're right.
That's why I didn't see it until they re-syndicated it on TNN.
And then you really didn't see it till the DVDs. Like, you appreciated it more, I think, when you watched it in succession.
No.
What was I gonna say? Sort of going back to the point I made there, like that original TNG episode. Sorry, not TNG, TOS, the original series episode with Mark Leonard as the Romulan commander. Have you watched that recently? It's really good. It's one of like
that's one of the best episodes.
Have you seen that, Emma?
Where Kirk is outflanked for most of the episode. Like, it's really good.
It's taking the story and away from the movie Silent Running. Not Silent Running. What's the one with Clark Gable and where they're in submarines?
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
It's not. Is it Silent Running? No, Silent Running is the movie with Bruce Stern. What is crap? What is the movie I'm trying to think of?
We'll have to look it up on.
It's Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster.
Balance of Terror was the name of the episode.
Balance of Terror is the name of the episode.
Yeah.
And then Silent Run Deep. That's the name of the movie, I believe. But yeah, I mean, Balance of Terror is one of the great episodes of all of Star Trek. That one is surely a 10, although Unification 2.
So we're waiting for your Unification 2.
Emma has the correct answer. It is 9. It is 9. I agree with everything. I mean, as both of you said, it's a seminal moment in Star Trek. It really unified the old era with the new era, which they had tried in Star Trek 6. They included Michael Dorn as a token little thing, but this really unified the two eras. Regardless, I mean, when you watch it, the ending just falls apart. I mean, there's just and I mean, I watch it, I mean, out of sentimental value, but it's tough to recommend it to someone if you want to see like the best of Spock, let's say, or the best of Next Generation. Like, I don't think I would. I would only recommend it to somebody after they've come to love and appreciate the show. Like, I mean, we watched it because I know you love Spock.
Yep.
So you can appreciate the episode from that point of view. But like, if you were just a casual Star Trek fan and you didn't have any special love for Spock, I don't think I would have shown you Unification, because you would have been like, they just walk out of that room with no problem. Like there's flaws.
What would be the best way to introduce someone to Star Trek in terms of a Spock episode, or Spock with Spock as the...
Oh, I'd go back to the original show.
You have to start with the original series.
Yeah, what episode would you introduce them to? What episode would you...
Off the top of my head, Amok Time.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, even though it's an alternate version, I do like the Mirror episode, even though it's an alternate Spock. But I think
Oh, is it called Mirror Mirror?
I don't remember.
I thought it was In a Mirror Darkly.
Is it?
No,
Okay.
In a Mirror Darkly is the DS9.
Oh, it's the DS9 version
episode, yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
I think in Mirror Mirror, even though it's an alternate Spock, you do get a sense of through alternate Spock what real Spock is like, you know,
with a goatee,
with a goatee, which is great, right? Can you think of classic Spock?
To me, the Horta episode is a good one.
Yeah, I was thinking of that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
And of course, Journey to Babel, where his parents are introduced.
Oh, that's right. But yeah, the Horta one comes to mind.
Yeah,
I still remember that after all these years. How, like,
it's when that was.
Yeah,
that's a classic.
All right. Anything else about this episode of Starfleet Boy? Or about Star Trek, rather, I should say. I
think we've exhausted everything.
All right, we've exhausted our discussion. Audience, if you've made it through to both episodes to this point, we really appreciate you. We appreciate you anyways, even if you're only watching for like a few minutes. And please comment below and let us know what your thoughts are about the discussion we've been having. And live long and prosper, everybody.
Peace in our time, Jill True.
We're waiting for you to do the hand gesture. There we go. Everyone's doing it. Yay. All right. And that's a wrap.